Welcome to River City Labs. Who has not been to River City Labs before? Put your hands up. Excellent, that's what we like to see, new faces. So welcome to River City Labs and welcome back to River City Labs for those who have been here before. My name is Peta Ellis and I'm the CEO of River City Labs, and we have just turned 6. So we have been in this game for quite a while and we've seen loads of entrepreneurs come through this journey. We've hosted lots of events like this, which is something we call an entrepreneur's story or an entrepreneur's journey. It's an opportunity for us to bring really interesting people in and to tell their story and to share their journey. A lot of them are quite traditional business people, other people are startup founders, other people are like our amazing guest this evening who's had probably about 5 careers rolled into one. So I am very pleased to welcome tonight Ben Roberts-Smith, who is our entrepreneur this evening, who's going to share his journey with us. I'm going to introduce Ben with a very lengthy bio because it's so involved. I'm going to read it to you because I couldn't possibly leave anything out. So, Ben Roberts-Smith has served with distinction in the Australian Army and Special Air Service Regiment. His service spans over 19 years and includes operational deployments to East Timor, Fiji, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Middle East. Please let me know if I get something wrong here. Ben is a recipient of the Victoria Cross for Australia, the Medal of Gallantry and Commendation for Distinguished Service. And in 2013, he launched his own consultancy, the RS Group Australia, and advised numerous national clients across a variety of sectors in relation to corporate culture, strategic restructuring and change management. I know there's a few corporates in the room tonight who's going to find that very interesting, and this is the bit that I like the most. He focused extensively on assisting companies to achieve the benefits of a high-performance workplace culture. That's also something that I know a lot of you are going to be interested in hearing about. We've just had a discussion before about high-performance teams and what he brings from his previous roles within the Special Forces into the corporate landscape. Ben has completed a Master of Business. This is after those first 2 careers. Went back to uni at UQ to get a Master of Business Administration and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. 2015, he was appointed by the Deputy General Manager of as Deputy General Manager of the 7 Network for Regional Queensland, and in June that year was promoted to General Manager, so then stepped into the media game. 2016 saw a restructure of operations within 7 West Media, and at that time, Ben's responsibilities expanded to include the Brisbane market as well as regional Queensland. And he is now the General Manager of the 7 Network in Queensland, and his contribution to Australia extends past his military service. He's also the Deputy Chairman of the Prime Minister's Advisory Council for Veterans' Mental Health, Deputy Chair of the Prime Minister's Industry Advisory Committee on Veterans Employment, member of the Queensland Veterans Advisory Council, patron of the SAS Association Wandering Warriors, and a National Ambassador for Legacy. And he's also been involved with our own River City Labs Accelerator. And he was actually on the last selection panel for the latest intake of the teams that are graduating tomorrow. So he was very much involved in the selection of those teams and is keen to see where they've ended up now. So that is our own connection for Ben into River City Labs. So please join me in welcoming our special guest tonight.
Thank you.
So I promise that the rest is not going to be that formal, but as you can see, there is a lot to get through and it's all very, very important and very impressive, and I would not want to get any of that wrong. And I also want to extend a special welcome to Ben's lovely wife, Emma. Where is she? Hiding around here somewhere. She probably hates me calling her out. Now I have to, I do have a personal connection as well. So back in my high school years, I had a massive crush on this really hot guy at Ipswich Grammar, which was Emma's brother. And I did eventually get to go out with him, lucky me. But in a strange series of a turn of events, that is how we all know each other. So there's a few connection points there. And I did reach out to this past boyfriend of mine on Instagram, as you do these days, and ask for some dirt on Ben. I said, please, I'm chatting to him tonight. What have you got? What stories have you got? Because they're both involved in special services, and I said surely there's some war stories that you can share, but he didn't. He had ultimate respect and said, as much as I would love your event to go well, I can't share any stories. So there you go. I'm gonna have to make some up, or hopefully
I know just as much about him.
Yes, you can share for him as well. Anyway, Ben, with that extremely colourful history, tell me, how did this start as a kid? What were you like?
Look, I was a child that really didn't enjoy school. I was just one of those kids. I didn't find it particularly engaging. I didn't like the way I was being taught. It didn't suit the type of person that I was. I couldn't sit in a classroom and be fed information. And the reason I say that is because it will become relevant later when I talk about what happened in my life and my career. But because of that, I really struggled through school. So I was looking to get out as quickly as possible, but I really enjoyed sport, as most people do. If you're not enjoying school, you fall back on something else, extracurricular, and for me it was sport. And so that sort of drove my schooling, and my family have a very long history in the military. So we have relatives that we can track all the way back who fought in the Boer War in Australia's first conflict, and in every subsequent conflict since. So for me, it was very much a case of sort of following in the family footsteps, but also, I had a real penchant for it. I just loved it. I wanted to be a soldier, always did. Never thought about doing anything else. And it's interesting because when you do an MBA, or when you go back for any kind of postgrad, it's always, why are you doing this degree? What does it mean to you? What's your dream job? What's it going to do for you? And I would always have to stand up at the front of the class and tell them what I was going to do. And the problem was, I said, look, I've actually lived my dream. Like, I've done it. I've done everything that I wanted to do. I've had the best job in the world, and now it's just gravy. So I just wanted to know what you all knew, because I didn't know what you know, but now I do. So it's really funny like that, because you leave, and that's really, again, quite relevant, because when you do leave something like that, what's next? What's your next goal? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And from an entrepreneurial sense, if you leave the safety of what you know, just like when you leave the military, you are a specialist at what you do. You know what it is. You're very comfortable in that world. To take that step out and do something that is completely abstract, that has risk involved, that questions, the question that you ask yourself is, how do I put food on the table? Particularly for people with partners and families, how do I feed my children because I'm not getting paid every Thursday like I used to be? Where's that next check coming from? And that part of my journey is probably the most relevant to what these guys have gone through, through this incubator, and what startups and entrepreneurs go through. But I certainly see my time in the military is still the best part of my career. I very much enjoy what I'm doing now. You've got to love what you're doing, obviously, but I'm also at that point where you can't, like a sportsman, you can't keep doing the job I was doing forever. I'm way over the hill now in terms of being in the SAS. I turned 40 this year, so that's it. I'm done. Back doesn't work, knees are blown out, shoulders are gone. So now I'll just focus on...
You're only halfway.
Yeah, that's right.
Can we just go back to the school bit for a minute? We do a lot of work with kids in schools, teaching entrepreneurship and creating businesses within schools, and it's a lot of really successful entrepreneurs are often the ones who didn't enjoy school, didn't like the format, the structure. You're now a parent, and you've got kids in school. Do you do much with schools, or do you have any advice? I mean, obviously the world's moving really fast, and kids now learn at a really fast pace because of everything, all the information that comes to them. And school, or traditional public schools in particular, are still quite slow. Do you have any insight there, or anything that you can share in terms of how to get those kids to, like yourself, to engage?
Well, the first thing I'll say is, having kids that are now at school, I think it's a completely different prospect. I mean, our kids go to a school where the way they are taught just blows away, what I grew up with. They are completely engaged. They actually enjoy going to school. And I think most educators are going that way, mainly because of technology, because we have the ability to do that. But also, I think they've learned a lot of lessons. Like with everything evolves, and education has evolved just the same. But I do go to schools. I spend a lot of time at schools, but I think my role, if you like, in society, whether I like it or not, because of the award of the Victoria Cross, is to uphold the institution of that award.
Yep.
It is not about me being a Victoria Cross recipient. I don't think that is as important as the institution of the award itself, because the award itself means so much more to so many people. And particularly in Australia, my view is very simple, that award means a great deal to everyone, because it destroys any sense of class barriers. It does not matter who you are, or what you have done, or how much money you make, or where you started, or where you want to go. The award signifies an act on a particular day at a particular time that could be anybody. Mm-hmm. And that is, there's something unique about that sense that it could be anybody.
Can you explain to us what that was for you, please?
That's
For those that don't
that's
know,
a long story.
The best summary of it for those who haven't, something we can't find on Wikipedia.
That's a good one. Because Wikipedia's got everything.
It does. Look.
No, look, so I'll try and make this really brief. My role in Afghanistan in 2010 was to take part in strike operations, which simply means that our job was to target the senior leadership of the Taliban. So our job was to capture or kill them. We'd locate them and find them, catch them or kill them. Right, that was our job. And on one particular night, we'd flown into a village in Kandahar province in 4 Black Hawk helicopters, 25 Australians, and we assaulted a particular building. But when we landed, we came under immense machine gun fire from multiple directions and rocket fire. Got pinned down on the landing site, so as soon as the helicopters landed, it was already, we completely lost the initiative. We had 2 guys shot, one through the chest, getting off the helicopters, and we were in a very bad way. We had to fight our way into what was a dry creek bed, and then from that position, ascertain that we were obviously outnumbered. The helicopters couldn't come back in to get us out, and we would have to fight through the village. The village was only about 1 kilometre long, and we started to do that, fight through the village. At a point in that fight, we were pinned down as a troop in the creek line by what we thought was a machine gun position. When I say a machine gun, it's like a rifle, a bit bigger, fires a lot of bullets. Very quickly, not what you want to come up against. And nonetheless, this was happening. And so my patrol commander at the time, he came up and said, we're going to, my patrol of 6 men, because in that 25-man group, you have 5 patrols of 5 men, right? So he had a 6-man team that day. And he said, we're going to attack that machine gun position, and that will allow the rest of us to move forward and continue the fight. Very simple. We move forward in what we call an extended line. So you're in a straight line, shoulder to shoulder, about 5 metres apart. And you move towards, you fire and move, which means someone's shooting while the other people move. You cover each other and you bound forward as you're doing it, right? And you do that moving towards the gun through what was a fig orchard. And fig orchards are very thick. A lot of trees are perfectly aligned on either side, but the top of the trees are very bushy, so it's very dark underneath, a lot of shadows, shards of light sort of piercing through, but you can't see the enemy, you can't see them. You know they're there, you can hear the machine gun in front of you. We're fighting slightly uphill. We kept doing that about 80 metres away. Then we got to 40 metres away and the fire intensified. And it started to become so heavy that we could no longer bound forward in that line. You know, we had to start doing what's known as leopard crawling, which means you lie on your stomach and you pull yourself forward on your elbows. You're not still firing your guns, but you're crawling on your guts basically. And you need to do that to stay as low to the ground as you can so that you don't get hit. And we continue to do that, but the group on the right side, so the 3 guys of our team on the right side were engaged by a different group of the insurgents or the Taliban and had to start fighting in a different direction. So we now had 3 of us moving one way and 3 moving the other way, and the commander in the middle trying to control both. Very hard to do. But the 3 of us in front of the machine guns had to keep going forward, and it was myself in the middle and a guy either side. And we fought forward till around 20 metres from the position. And at that point, we could now see it. And what it was a elevated position in the centre of the orchard. It had a low 1 metre mud brick wall around it. Probably a 2-storey building behind it. But that's pretty much all we could make out because we were still trying to look through the trees. And you could see the weapons firing, so the muzzle flashes. But what we ascertained at that point was that there wasn't 1 machine gun, there was 3. And through some manoeuvring, I had ended up on the right-hand side of the 3 of us. And from the right-hand side, I had a much clearer view, and I could see that they had established 3 different machine gun positions along the axis of this low 1 metre high wall. And at the time we didn't know, but what they'd done is they'd reinforced the wall. So they'd made the wall thicker with mud brick so that our bullets wouldn't penetrate it. They'd cut firing ports out of the wall so they could fire their guns through the wall but keep their heads below the top of the wall. So very hard for us to get our bullets onto them. At that time I'd counted around 7 insurgents moving back and forwards around the guns, so the 3 machine gunners and some other guys with AK-47s or rifles. Now in normal terms you just want to throw some grenades up there and hopefully that'll take some of them out and you go over the position. So we went through that process for a while, but that wasn't very effective. And eventually 1 grenade went off and it took out a machine gun on the right flank. So the machine gun on the far right, that stopped. But then there's 1 in front of us and another on the left. And the decision at that point was, if we don't do something, someone's going to get hit. Because I'd seen the guys on my left in this fig orchard lying there. And if you had drawn a 30 centimetre circle around one of their heads, his name was Dan, he was the guy on the very far left, you could see the bullets ripping into this circle. And the foliage on the trees is just being shredded. So the sticks and the leaves are just falling down on top of the guys. And a fig tree is around, at very best case, is around 30 centimetres in diameter, the stalk of the tree. That if a machine gun bullet hits a fig tree, the tree just explodes. Lying behind a fig tree is not going to save you. It's not cover. And when you realise that and you see that, you think, well, either I've got to act or I've got to go home and face their families. And that's a really daunting prospect, because the problem I had at the time was right at that exact moment, my wife was back in Australia and she was 7 months pregnant with my twin girls that we'd been trying for, close to 6 years of IVF for. And still, I look at that and I think, I would much rather that it's me that gets hit than have to go home and face their families. And so I saw an opportunity and I was able to run forward to the wall itself. And when I got to the wall, for whatever reason, I felt that I was under the guns, but what I was confronted with was a small gap in the wall, like a pedestrian access, if you like. And there was a 2 metre sort of high dirt berm, which is why the position was elevated. I made my way up this little dirt berm, dropped into the gap in the wall and turned to my left. And roughly where that camera is was the first machine gunner, this little stand here, maybe a metre to my left. And he turned his head and we looked at each other and he started to wheel his machine gun up and I engaged him with 2 rounds and he went down. And then I started to move down the wall as quickly as I could. So I got to the second machine gun, which was firing at the time, and engaged that until that stopped firing. And my 2 mates were already up. As soon as they were able to get up from under that machine gun fire, they moved forward as soon as they could. They got straight up to me, but then I had to make a decision. And this, I suppose, is also the crux of it, which is my team commander, who was on the right side, was involved with that other fight with the guys that had to go in a different direction. But now there's only 3 of us there, and they're saying, what do we do? Do we assault this building, just the 3 of us, and try and secure it, use that as our strong point, or do we wait for everybody else to push up to us? Now, we could have waited and we could consolidate and go in there with a much stronger and safer, sort of assault package, if you like, for lack of a better phrase, or you keep pushing the advantage because you know you've got it now and you know you've got to roll on and you just do it and you get it done and you hold it. And that was the decision that I made. The 3 of us would do that. And I briefed the guys real quickly in what we call QBOs, like quick battle orders. It literally takes 30 seconds, if that. And they were happy with that. We pushed across the courtyard and we went up to the building and we rolled through it. And interestingly enough, this is actually really, I suppose, probably a pertinent point. The guy in front of me, we had lined up on the wall next to the door, and the way that you do that is you get ready to make entry into the building by the first man will sort of start to quarter the door, which means you move around the door on an arc from the outside. And by doing that, as you're looking through the door, you can see using angles into the door before they can see you. And as you're doing it, he saw someone inside and he started to fire his weapon. But then he had a weapon stoppage, which meant he had an empty magazine, very common. He peeled out of the way, which is a drill, left me at the front. I decided to commit to crossing the threshold of the door and enter the room. Did that, saw the same guy inside, continued to engage him, turned to the left-hand corner of the room to clear it, which is our drill. Second guy with chest webbing and a rifle. Started to bring my weapon up, pull the trigger, nothing happens. My weapon stops. So now I'm in a room with a bad guy and I've got no weapon. So I start moving down the long axis of the wall, which is called hard targeting. So the drill is if your weapon stops in room combat, you've got to keep moving, right? You never stay still. If you stay still, then you're an easy target. But also by moving, if you move down a long axis, everyone in the room starts to look at you because you're moving. And because you're moving, they take their eyes off the door. And now they've taken their eyes off the door, the third man coming in should, in theory, be able to take a much simpler shot because there's no pressure on him now. No one's shooting at him. They're all looking at the guy moving. But while you move, you've got to be able to fix your weapon as you're going. And when you're the guy moving, it's called being the rabbit. And you move quick. But that all happened. The third guy comes in, and a drill that we would rehearse millions of times in Swanbourne in Perth is that room entry drill. And effectively, the third man coming in, who came in and took that shot, would save my life. But that is the drill. We would go and secure that building and hold it, and eventually everyone else would move up. And the 25 of us would consolidate on that building. But the point of that last part of the story, the room entry and that drill, is that everybody thinks that the SAS is really good at what they do because of all the high-end, sexy stuff we get to do. Jumping out of planes at night with oxygen masks and diving out of submarines or using explosives or sniping or all the stuff that you see in the movies. It looks really cool. It's actually really hard work, but that's not why we're good at what we do. We're good at what we do because we will get the little things right 100% of the time. In our world, in our workplace, it is all about a daily renewable contract. That is the agreement. You will live the standards of the organisation every single day. And if you don't, you will be called into account by your peers. Not the leadership, your peers. And that is a true story. That's what happens. If you don't meet the standards in the day, someone is going to check you. Because we expect each other to be at our peak, at our best, at every time. At every point, sorry. Because we can't afford not to be. And the thing is, we all have exactly the same goal in mind. So because, as I said before, when you get out of bed, we know every morning, I know exactly why I'm getting out of bed. There is no doubt. And everyone in my crew is exactly the same. So when we walk out the door and get onto a plane and we fly over to wherever it may be, there is no doubt. Everyone is there for the same reason. We are going to achieve the same goal, and we're going to do it using the best possible standards. And that is the only way to do it, if you want greatness. And when I talk about that, that is not a statement of arrogance, that is a statement of high performance. Right? Humility is key or core to our culture. You must have the humility, but if you don't have the confidence in each other, then you cannot be high performing.
Well, now I had a bad day today, but it seems like Rainbow... Now, next time you're having a bad day, just please let's go back to this story and understand that maybe the troubles you're having within your own teams and business probably is not that bad. It's not life or death.
A 13-hour battle that I just compressed into sort of 6 minutes.
That's good. Very, very impressive. There is so much in that. I'm going to try and unpack a fair bit of it. But also really humbling to hear. First, I mean, we know this stuff goes on. We don't actually know how or what it's actually like to be there in person and weigh up those options. Obviously, relationships is a big part of it. And I think anybody doing any sort of journey in terms of committing to something, or getting a partner or family or loved ones to understand why it is that you do what you do. And when you're choosing life partners, it's a big part of it to have that person understand why it is that you do what you do so that you can go to work, if you call that work. It's a big part of knowing that person's on the journey with you. So can I just ask a personal question in terms of relationships? So you had, a beautiful wife here, pregnant at that point in time, but obviously when you met and you knew where you were going and you chose this path, what was that conversation like?
So I met my wife only a year into the army. So I was a brand new, I think 19-year-old, just joined, been in the army a year since I was 18. So Emma and I have been together for the whole time. So if you're talking about going through the ringer as a partner, it's every single part. It's like going to the regular army and doing all the trips away, and the guy learning his trade and all the hard parts about that. And then there was East Timor with the regular army, and then it was, I'm going to do the selection course and what that entails. And I'm going to take you from where you're comfortable, which is the East Coast, because your whole family's here. I'm going to take you to WA, which may as well be Mars. And I'm going to leave you there. And not only am I going to take you there, but I'm going to leave you there, and then I'm going to go away for 8 months a year. So you're going to be on your own, and you don't know anybody there. And I'm going to do that to you for 11 years. And we added it up the other day, and if you think about it, I've done 11 deployments, and that's just combat operations. So that means to me that I've done in excess of 6 and a bit years away, as in full 6 and a quarter years on combat operations. We put the training into it probably just over 8.5 years, and we were there for 11. So that's how much time I saw my family. To give you some context of what that life is like and why. Is that why you got on? That's why we're still together. Brilliant. No.
There's something. There's a lot in that.
This job's killing us. No, look. I mean, that's a good point, right? I mean, the thing is, you have to have the right. It's the right type of person. It's a very special person that can live that military life. And to answer your question more correctly, I made a decision to go to the SAS after 7 years in the regular army. But that decision has to be one that is with your partner, regardless of who you are. And the reason for that is because if you go to do the selection course, which is known to be reasonably difficult to get into the SAS, if you do that, you have to have no excuses. Just like starting up a business. If you want to put your life savings and everything you have into starting up a business, they've got to be on board. Because if they're not on board, it's going to fail at some point. And if it fails, it's going to be so much pressure on top of the pressure that exists in just trying to get it going, that it makes it nearly, not impossible, but nearly impossible. And it makes it a lot harder. So same for us trying to get through the course. So we had this conversation before I even started. I said, look, I want to do it. If I do it, it's going to mean I'm not going to see you. You're going to be alone. But if you come over with me, I'll marry you. So I got in. And the first phone call back home was like, so looks like we're getting married in Perth. But that was the deal. And full credit to Emma. And there is no way that I could have done that without having the support of a partner like Emma. I mean, it unless you're an absolute single, in our case for the SAS, if you're a single guy doing the course, then yeah, that's easy. It's just about you. But if you're not, then you have to have someone that actually gets it, that really wants to help you and support you, because it's a long, hard road. And it's not even not the success of getting in and being there. It's the bit of making the decision to do it, start the training for it, and then actually get over the hump of the course itself. Because people think the SAS selection course is 3 weeks long, and that's the bit where they're just testing you, right? That's what you see on the movies, like the same stuff the SEALs do or Delta or whatever. You get punished and it's arduous and it's horrible, but that's 3 weeks. To be an SAS operator, you then go on, the reason you do selection is so that you can be deemed suitable to start training. And that training goes for 18 months. And you do every skill set that you can imagine. So you'll learn to be a sniper, you'll do diving, you'll do close quarter combat, parachuting, all those skills, medicine, radios, the whole bit. But at any stage in any of those courses, if you fail one of those courses, you're done. So you can pass selection, and lots of people do. But if you don't pass a course in that training, then you get sent back to your unit anyway, and you don't stay. Right, so the point of that is you're under pressure for nearly 2 years straight, constant scrutiny. They're looking at your attributes every day, your skill sets, whether you're improving, whether you've actually got it right, whether you do actually have the ability to assimilate the information and apply it as required. So it's a tough gig for 2 years, and so that stress then promulgates down into the family, right? Like any kind of stress. The same stress you feel when you're trying to get businesses going. Sometimes you have a win, sometimes you have a loss, but it's felt at home as much as it's felt in the workplace. So that's a hard thing for a partner to go through, but very relevant. And the only way to deal with that, and the one thing that I can pass on in my with some confidence, is that if you can't communicate that effectively, then you're going to fail. Because the one thing that happens is we get so absorbed with ourselves trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, and we want to make that work, and you're doing it with complete and utter focus, but sometimes the end doesn't justify the means, right? And what you do by doing that is you ostracise everything that actually matters. And I've done that. I'm 100% been guilty of that, and it just makes life harder. And I'm telling you, this is something I got very wrong. You put everything before your family. And sometimes it happens when you don't realise it's happened. You're just working so hard because you want to do the right thing by your family, but you forget they're actually there, and you got to do something with them. So that's definitely a learning that I took away from being so driven and focused and wanting to succeed.
Yeah. And obviously, at some point you chose to leave the services and choose a different path. So obviously a family or a new realm of being a parent might have had something to do with that.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I came back from Afghanistan in 2012, but I'd already been awarded the Victoria Cross, and clearly I say that because it changes your life. Doesn't matter who you are, it's just the way it is, and you can't explain that to anybody in any great detail, because unless you've gone through it, you really don't understand. And it's bizarre. If you see a sportsman, to give you some kind of analogy, they will have time, and that time, from when they're a junior sportsman, they start to get a bit of recognition, and there's the lower grades, they might do a bit better, a bit of media attention now, they're starting to see they might, this is what fame's like, over the course of years, and then they break the big leagues and they're playing NRL or NBL, whatever it might be, and now they're in the media eye and they get it, and they've got people giving them media advice and how to deal with social media and all this other stuff, and how to live. And with a Victoria Cross, when you're in the SAS, you have a protected identity status. So not only do you not have social media, but no one is actually supposed to know what you do. Family do, but you don't tell anyone. So what do you do? I'm in the army. That's fine, because you can have that kind of cover, but you don't typically talk about what you do. You don't wear uniforms. You don't go, walking around like you see some army people wearing uniforms. We would never do that. You don't salute people. It's just a different environment. It's actually a lot like here, because it's just based on respect. Everyone knows everyone's got a job to do. You've got a specialist. You just do your job. But it doesn't matter who you are or what you're doing. It's a very very linear sort of hierarchical structure. It's not the pyramid that you expect from the military typically. But the point of that, excuse me, is to to be able to do that job and walk away at the end of it to transition is extremely difficult if you don't understand where you're going. So my view is really simple. When I wanted to transition, you have to be able to identify what the next goal is. And I'd got to a point where at 35, it was either I stay and become a life-serving member in the army, because that's it at 35, or you get out and you make a new career. And the Victoria Cross itself, as I said, had thrown me, to go back to that other story, had thrown me back into the spotlight in the space of 20 minutes. So a guy that not only does no one know who you are, they don't know what you do, they come out, they do the parade, they pin that medal on you, and in 20 minutes, it goes from being the guy that no one's ever heard of to a full press pack at the front of the barracks, which is every media outlet, print, TV, radio, in the country, standing there, and it just goes ballistic. And then from that point forward, from that moment, you are national property. And you get into a taxi in Sydney, and the guy turns and goes, "Oh, Ben, how's the kids going? Yeah, it's good. Yeah, we know how the girls." Like, "Who are you? I don't know you." But you get used to it. It's bizarre. And people walk up to you in the street now all the time, and you can see them coming, and you just think, "Yep, he's going to come and say, oh, hey, yeah, oh, you don't know me." I'm like, "Yep, I know. It's all right. It's okay. How you going? Yep, good." Yeah, it's just how it is. So it's quite bizarre to be like that. And the reason I say that is because it sort of that's what throws a spanner in the works when I'm thinking about, do I want to get out or stay in? Because staying in at that point is also problematic, because you become this thing that defence wants to put up here, but you're still the guy. You're still the guy that's with the boys, doing the job. You know, what's changed? Nothing. You know, nothing's changed. It really hasn't. So my biggest thing was I want to go back to Afghanistan. So after the medal, I went back for another tour. Came back from that tour, and 3 days after that tour, I discharged. So my discharge process was not textbook. Normally you go through a transition. Mine was I handed my stuff in. I got off the plane from Afghanistan, and my family had moved to Queensland. I gave my stuff in and walked out the front gates of Campbell Barracks and never went back. And I got on a plane. Yep, got on a plane, flew to Queensland, walked into the house that Emma had picked. I hadn't even seen it. Yep, this is nice. And then that was it. It was like, okay, what do we do now? You know, so what can I do now? And that was the bit about, well... And
had you thought about that? Obviously the transition into business, or think about even going back to study? Like, you went to university. Did you actually rock up like with all the other students?
Yeah. Well, I did want to go back into business. I mean, I did want to get into business. That was something I decided on. I was going to do an MBA even if I had stayed in the army. So that was the plan. So it just got accelerated because of the situation. So when I get back home, we get to Queensland, yep, I'll do the MBA, and then I'll go and find a job, everything will be fine. The only problem with that was that I wasn't getting paid. So that became problematic. And so actually what I did was I hit the talk circuit, because that's the one thing that I didn't know much about. I was not a public speaker. I hadn't been given any training whatsoever. But I picked up this really good gig touring Canada, the US, and Europe. And I went on to some huge names on this roadshow, and these guys were phenomenal speakers. But I'm talking about crowds, and I was saying to someone earlier, crowds like 3,500 people, New Jersey Opera House, hour just on stage, no notes, just talking, playing it out, and that's what they expected me to do. And so I was doing that with them, and they would critique me for free. And at the end, we'd go out for dinner, and they're giving me these hot tips about what I should do, and it was invaluable, that kind of learning. And I took that tour, and that was great. And then from then, the first year you do something like 130 corporate gigs, and my salary in the military compared to that, corporate speaking is outrageous, ridiculous money for what you do. It's ridiculous. An army guy, right? I'm getting shot at and getting paid like 60 grand a year. Awesome, it's great. But so you take my point. So it's ridiculous. But so that got us through that phase and got me into university and in a comfortable enough position to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And then start the business. And I learned about what companies actually wanted by talking to them on the circuit.
Right.
So I'd do my talk, I'd come off, I'd talk about leadership generically, and then I'd talk to the businesses, the CEOs and the COOs, and they would say, so can you teach that stuff? I'm like, yeah, of course. I've got another business. And I had nothing at all. Nothing established, there was nothing there. And so someone would say it, and I'd run back home, and I'd just type something up on the computer, and I'd put something together. Some of it was, looking back on it, was just horrendous. And I'd send it to them, and they'd be, oh, this is fantastic. You should come down and work with us. And so basically, this is the whole Richard Branson thing for me, which was, if you don't know and you've got a great opportunity, take it anyway and just
make it up,
fake it till you make it, right? And that was the scenario, and I did that. And at the end of sort of 4 to 6 weeks, I'd worked out what was necessary, what people wanted, where the niche in the market was from my perspective, and I picked up 3 national clients off the bat, which was PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I wrote their communication strategy and delivered them a cultural outcome that they were looking for, working through their human capital team. Australian Customs, and my job with them was to transition them or assist them in transitioning from customs to border force, which they are now, and write their use of force continuum. And then UBT Global, which is a conglomerate of companies that essentially they're a big business that try to help small businesses. And with them, it was just creating a 1-day leadership package that I made up myself, and then toured around Australia, Southeast Asia, and New Zealand, teaching all their people. And so that was year 1, and then through doing that.
The high performance workplace culture.
Yes,
yep.
Yes, that was that package, and that's what worked really well. And then that followed on. PwC took that 1-day package, and then from there I did some work with 7 West for PwC, and then they headhunted me to go to the TV business. So that's how that all happened, and it was all really just because I went on the talk circuit and someone said something one day, and I thought that's a good idea, and you just run with it.
And obviously, the background of being in the military and having your own personal routines, habits, your own, that doesn't come naturally for a lot of people, but it's been ingrained in you for a really long time. And obviously, that's what you went on to teach within the corporate environment. How important is it to you now on the day-to-day basis, having those daily routines and rituals to obviously get you into that state to be able to go out there and execute what it is you need to do? Very important.
Yep. So I am a creature of habit, but I also think, I train every morning. So without fail, I'll get up, much to my wife's disgust, the alarm will go off at like 4:30 or 5, depending on what's happening. And I'll go and train for an hour to an hour and a half, and that is my time to get everything into perspective and to put my day in order and not have to think or talk to people.
Yep.
And then I finish that and then go into my day, and that part of my day is really important to me. If I don't do that, it's not necessary, but it's important.
Yes.
And that means for me, I'm much more focused, can start the day more effectively. And then there's all the physical sides of that, the endorphins and all the other bits and pieces. And I'm a massive believer in that. I think it's really important because I've also gone through the side of the corporate life now where you get stuck at the desk and you're there sitting behind the desk for hours on end. You're pulling 18-hour days, and then you come home and you get up 4 hours sleep, and it becomes really detrimental to your performance. Mm-hmm. So my philosophy at Seven was really simple, and I've just we're the only part of our business in Queensland that now does flexible work hours.
Yep.
So one of the things I've never ever cared about is whether you turn up at 9 and leave at 5. I just don't care. Mm-hmm. Because in the army, in the regular army, one of the things we suffer from is what they call breezeway time. And breezeway time is between all the head office buildings, there's a breezeway, a corridor. And if you're regular soldiers, then you have to wait in the breezeway until the bosses come out and say, okay, it's 4 o'clock, you can knock off now. Even if there's nothing happening, you can sit there for hours. And then someone will walk out and go, okay, there's nothing, we've finished our work, you can go. Yep, it's great. And that used to always astound me. And the funny thing about it is it's exactly what happens in the corporate world. It's just different because in the corporate world, people will sit at their computer and play Sudoku or whatever it is, and that's because they don't want to walk out. And I'll tell you a classic. I did this with PwC, and I was at Luke Sayers' house the other day. He's the CEO of PwC, and what he has done with that business is phenomenal. When I saw it 5 years ago, when I started working with him, to what he has done now, it's like looking at the stuffy old accountancy firm who's transitioned to Google. You walk into PwC now, it's beanbags and walking machines, you plug the laptops in, there is no offices anymore. These are all partners that expect a corner office, and that whole mentality is gone. It's at a really good place. But the reason for that is because Luke was a leader that truly believed and executed on change. Yep. Didn't just talk the talk.
But that cultural shift, sometimes, we've seen it a lot of corporate organisations think the physical environments, they'll change the furniture and the work hours and make it flexible, but they don't actually work with changing the culture of the people.
Yes.
So obviously he's done that bit right.
Yeah, he really did. He's an exceptional leader, actually. My view on the flexible work hours, though, was really simple. We have, in media, the majority of my staff are female. And as with what happens, most females need to go on maternity leave, or there's some issue with, or they have kids already, and it's not conducive to a sound, positive lifestyle, right? So the way that you get around that, because some of my best people I've lost simply because they've got families, and we don't make an effort to provide an environment that is conducive to a positive work environment. So it's really easy to fix that. I don't care when you do your work. I don't care whether, if you're a salesperson, I just remoted our whole sales force, much to everyone's disgust down in Sydney. So our sales force now don't come to work, right? They have KPIs. So you have a budget, and your budget is measured daily and weekly. If you hit your budget, I don't care if you work Thursday nights and take 4 days off. I really don't care. Do whatever you want. If you want to take the kids to the beach in the morning, take them to the beach. It doesn't bother me. If I see you at the beach, I'll probably be down there. I'll be surfing. It's fine, as long as we get our work done. But that's the understanding. But that comes from discipline. If you have a culture of discipline, you can do that. And that comes from leadership. Because without that being promulgated from your leaders, you can't succeed. For true success, to get to that point where your business will be a true success, not just good or successful, but a true success, you need to have a culture of discipline supported by an entrepreneurial mindset. If you get those two things, disco. Whatever you want will happen. But it's getting the two things together. I'm not saying people need discipline. I'm saying you need a culture of discipline. People need to know what their left and right of arc are, what the parameters are, what they're allowed to do, what is expected of them because of the standards you have set. And an organisation will only ever perform to the level of the standards it has. So if you're in charge, set high standards, because that's where that's where they'll go, and that's how they'll perform. It's really simple. A lot of the time, though, we lose our way because we don't want to be accountable as leaders. And I say this in terms of me gut checking myself when I'm looking at my guys, and when I'm talking now to our C-suite in Sydney, and we're all having these big strategy meetings and we talk about things. It's really important to have that self-awareness, and that's something I don't think that a lot of people understand. Being self-aware is critical if you want to be a good leader. You have to understand what your weaknesses are. And it's okay to show a bit of weakness. It's okay to show people what your faults are. That is actually what humanises you to everybody else. The critical piece is you actually need to be able to talk to everybody. You cannot be, the democratic leader 100% of the time. That doesn't work. Right? Sometimes you do need to be an autocratic leader. Sometimes you do need to just go in and make a decision because you know it's right and it needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. It might be for a timely reason. But it doesn't mean you need to be a dictator all the time. What I'm saying is every single human being is different. They will all respond differently to different leadership styles. You will have a dominant leadership style, but more importantly, you need to understand what all the leadership styles are. And textbooks, there's 6 of them, but what I'm getting at is you just tailor the way you speak to people, basically, right? To put it in layman's terms, to suit the personality of the individual you're dealing with. You're dealing with an introvert, extrovert, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Right, the sales teams, they love it. Extroverts, no worries. You walk in there, you can holler, you can ring the bells, turn the music up loud, and that will fire them up, and they'll go and do what they're going to do. You try doing that stuff in finance? No chance. They'll go hide under their desks, and they'll just be like, oh. So you got to balance what you're doing, right, with what you're with who you're talking to.
I think there's a lot of organisations as well that if they understand that they have a culture issue internally, they might get experts in to come and work with their people on culture and transformation. But if it doesn't come from the top or by leadership by example, I don't think it has the same sort of impact. Do you agree? And what do you think about obviously bringing in people to teach or to change culture internally with their own staff, opposed to working directly with the leaders to get them to shift to where they need to be to lead the company?
Look, definitely, it has to come from the top. I mean, to change a culture, it has to start literally at the top.
Yep.
Whoever that may be, and come down from there. So, to promulgate values through a company, you can send out the paperwork. I've just gone through a classic example of this. So if you have all of your values are established, they put it up on the whiteboards around the building. We've got all the posters up. It is like literally the classic. You're on the MBA. They're giving you a case study of how to really fuck up the values. Right, so we've just been through that because it's the 101. Don't just put them on the wall. You've got to live them. And I think it's really important to understand that if you're going to do that, then you need buy-in from the staff or the people, which means they have to select the values. But how you do that is by articulating, as I said earlier, what the standards are. And to me, they're different, right? Like the standards of the organisation are very different to the expectations, and that comes from the leadership. And it's really critical that they get that right. And part of the problem is always going to be how we judge accountability. The best CEOs are the ones that are always prepared to accept accountability. Yep. And they're the ones that everyone says, "Oh, he's such a great guy." Because right or wrong, they're there, and they shape up, they turn up, and they take it on the chin. Yep. And that's the important part.
And we were talking before a bit about, which is something really common in this industry, the startup or entrepreneurship, is imposter syndrome. Obviously not feeling like you know enough, or you should be in that role, or there's someone better than you, and obviously that can be a blocker for a lot of people to not even start. Obviously you didn't come from the media background, but you're now leading a really large media company. How do you personally deal with those feelings now? Obviously feeling like if you don't know enough, you need to keep leveling up all the time.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The one thing that was important to me when I left the military going into media is that I knew at that point, when I got the opportunity, I mean, obviously I did those other things, I did the talk circuit and my consultancy and things like that, but that was all stuff I was still very comfortable with. I kept in my lane, and it was quite niche, so that was easy to do. The point of that, though, was to take a jump to media and be in charge of a media business, which is as diversified as Seven West. You have to be prepared to make yourself vulnerable. And that's really interesting, right? Because I'm saying, I think the best way to grow and develop and learn is to accept the fact that you don't know anything. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I jumped into a business where they said, right, you've got 400 staff, $200 million of revenue, you've just started an MBA, hadn't even finished an MBA, and now you're in charge. And here's the financials, knock your socks off. I'm like, what's a balance sheet? No, it wasn't that bad. But it was like, I mean, I'm in a position where, quite frankly, you're thinking, shit, I don't know anything about TV. I don't know how they put the news together. I don't know why would they do that? Why do our people behave like this? Not part of the culture, wasn't part of the boys club. And that was really daunting to me because you don't really know who to turn to. But that is also a critical point. You've got to have mentors. And mentors come in all shapes and sizes. And I can tell you right now, no matter the decisions I've got to make or how hard they are or how old I've been, whether it was when I was younger or now, having the ability to fall back on those mentors to me has been critical. And I have many of them, whether it's people in the banking sector through to people in the military to, like Luke, we've been talking about. All of those people bring different perspectives, but it's a grounding force for me because I can gut check and make sure that I am aligned with my values and what I should be doing and what is right, that I haven't got it wrong. But then you've also got to be prepared to make the decision and to accept the risk. So going into the media and making myself vulnerable taught me a hell of a lot about myself and about what I needed to do and what I needed to learn in terms of moving forward. And the one thing about that is it's continuous. So it doesn't end. It's not like you just do it and then you know everything. My view was, I'm a generalist. I need to know a little bit about everything. I've got all these people in media that are all specialists. They know their job inside out. No different to running an SAS patrol or a team in the SAS. I've got all these guys that are specialists. I've got snipers, medics, demolitions guys. I'm the boss. My job is just to make decisions. Their job is to provide me with information about their specialty when I need to know it. And I listen to them because they are specialists. That's the critical piece. And now I can listen to them and I can disagree, but I'll listen to them first. And if I do that, what I know is they will buy in, and whatever decision I make, because I've listened to them and they know I've listened to them and I've taken it into account in the way I plan and the way that I communicate the orders or the business plan, whatever it might be, they will also come for the ride. They don't have to agree with me, but they know that the process I've gone through has considered their point of view. That is the way that you get people on board. If you can't communicate like that, they will not come with you. If they think you've ignored them, even if you haven't ignored them, but you haven't communicated it effectively that you have, they won't come. They just won't come with you. That's a really important point, and I've seen that so many times. I'm trying to teach my managers the same thing, because people aren't necessarily that good at communicating their thought processes. We can talk to each other, but it's like the why. Everyone wants to know why. That's a human nature, right? We all want to know why. You've got to be able to explain the why to them. Much like we talked earlier with the partners. If they understand the why, you're good. Right? They don't have to agree, but they'll get it. They can do it if they understand. Awesome.
So that's the business world. What did becoming a father teach you?
I've now got to be honest too. Look, when my children were born, I was lucky. I'd just got home, so I'd been home for like 2 weeks, which is an awesome story because they were supposed to come 7 weeks after that. I got home and I thought, this is great. I'll take 4 weeks of holidays. Just got back from Afghanistan in 2010. We're going to go and chill out at the beach. Went to the gym that morning, blew my back out at the gym, so I could hardly walk, hobbling home down the hill, come in, and then we had a friend come over who's a doctor, and he noticed something about Emma, blood pressure or whatever, and said, look, you go to the hospital. Like, oh really? He goes, just a checkup. And she leaves the room and he goes, mate, they're coming now. I was like, I can't walk.
Oh, don't worry about her. She's just carrying twins, but don't worry about your back.
So I took a couple of Valium and off we go. And we're down to the hospital and that was it. So the kids came, a significant, about 4 weeks or so early. But the thing about that was because they were twins and the way it turned out, I had to spend the first couple of days or week down there in neonatal ward when they put them in the little humidity cribs because they were quite small. They were under 2 kilos each because they were preemie. And I'd literally, you got to remember this, so I can put this into context for you. That story that I told you about the VC, that had just happened like 2 weeks ago. And I've gone from that day to now being there in this neonatal ward. My wife was upstairs after the surgery and I'm looking at these two like 1.8 kilo things in this humidity crib and I'm just like, you go through all this death, right? All this death. But then all of a sudden you get to see life like that, which I had not ever seen in that form and obviously more personal to me. And it was just one of those moments, like that's one of those things that changes you a little bit. And it changes you because you realise what you actually care about. And that was a really powerful moment for me. And the funny thing about that is even with that knowledge, or that feeling and how I felt about that, even with that, when I went on to go back to work and we went back home and life goes on, I still found myself getting caught up in, as I do now, still caught up in the, I've got to succeed, I've got to get the work done, I've got to be at work, I need to be with the boys, I should be shooting, I should be in Afghanistan. And then, you come back on the weekend, it's like, oh yeah, it's great to be with the kids, but I've got to go because I should be doing this. And it doesn't change in the corporate world. And I don't think it would change if you're, looking to start businesses. I mean, it's difficult, it's really tough.
It's something you can't turn off, and I think that's what, going back to for those that do have partners, is understanding the why. It's really important for them to understand why it is that our brains just don't actually switch off, and you're always looking for new opportunities all the time, regardless of whatever's happening. But going back to obviously the shift, there's lots and lots of changes, but there is, obviously you've been able to, from what it appears, is maintain a really good, consistent, healthy mental state, even from what we're seeing. But obviously you've got coping strategies or mechanisms to deal with that, because obviously there must be nights where you lay there and you're obviously getting flashbacks, but then you've got, a whole family here and trying to join all of your worlds together. How does that work in your head?
I've got flashbacks of the ratings from My Kitchen Rules. That's killing me at the moment. I get every morning at the ratings, I'm like, no.
From Afghanistan to My Kitchen Rules, that's big. That's big.
Killing me. No, look, I've never had a massive issue, and again, look, everyone's different. I'm heavily involved with veterans and veterans affairs, so I don't say this lightly. There's a lot of work I do in that space, and I'm very careful of how I put what I'm about to say, but everyone's different in how they perceive and absorb situations and experiences, and for whatever reason, I seem to have come through that bit reasonably unscarred. I don't, for whatever reason, maybe the training, maybe it's the type of person I am, I don't know. But some people will have one experience and it can literally ruin their life. But it's no different to someone, witnessing a car accident or a murder or something. Sometimes it happens. For me, I got through that bit pretty unscathed. And in saying that, like, do I get upset about my friends that were killed? Of course I do. That's human nature. It's what happens. When we catch up maybe once a year with the guys and we all go and have a beer and we start talking about the lads and we want to have a cry, we'll have a cry, because that's how you deal with it. That's how you let it out. And I've got no problem saying that at all. That's just how it is. But it's the guys that can't control that. It's the guys that can't stop themselves feeling like that every day. That's what PTSD is. You have no control over that depression or that depressive state. So for me, that side of it wasn't hard. I've found it more difficult in the transition, even though because all of the assistance that I've got because of my profile and things like that, it should be easy, but it's actually exactly the same, because I get all these doors are open for you all the time, but you still got to walk through them, and you still got to pull it off on the other side. I had a lot of people when I first left, when I was on that talk, so a lot of people want to shake my hand and have all these big offers and these big promises that never eventuated. And I started to lose faith a little bit thinking, you know, actually I don't think I haven't got the skills. I don't have what these people are looking for. And that's pretty challenging when you start to self-doubt. But you get, again, to a point where I would always look back and think, well, you know what? I did the SAS selection course, and I did that with no help from anyone other than my wife. My wife's with me now. We both agree this is what we want to do. And the only thing that can stop me doing what I want to do is me. And at some point, you have that realization where all you have to do is get up in the morning and you look in the mirror and say, I'm not going to fail. And it doesn't matter how many times you do fail, or you get knocked over, or you don't get the job you want, or the business isn't working, or you know the investor doesn't want to invest. That actually doesn't matter, because the biggest key to success is that you keep pushing the wheel.
Yep.
And what happens is eventually it just happens and you don't even realise you've got there. The big monumental event has taken place and you turn around and go, wow, we've actually done it. I didn't realize, how did that happen? I don't even know how that happened. It's because you didn't give up. And that's the critical piece.
Yep.
You know, and that's how, you know, the SAS is all about. That's why you get into the SAS. That's how you survive in battle. You cannot give up. There is no other option. And it's not because you don't want to die. It's because you don't want to let the people down around you. So as a business or an entrepreneur, you know, you don't want to let your family down. You don't want to let, whether it's your mum and dad or your kids or your wife or your husband, you know, you don't want to let those people down. And that's a really good motivator, in my opinion. And I use that all the time. And things get hard, you know, it happens. And we all go through that. And I've had my ups and downs just in general life, stresses of work and can you do it, is it going to happen?
Yeah.
And everybody fights, and that's the other thing, everybody fights those demons. There isn't a human being on earth that hasn't gone through the self-doubt. Right? So anyone who says they haven't is just not telling the truth. And so you got to remember that bit. That's the bit. You're like, yeah, it's hard for me now. But if it wasn't hard, everybody would do what you're doing. You know, everyone would be in my job, but they're not. Everyone does different stuff.
Or they wouldn't be satisfied. And look, we got a room full of people who would understand exactly that, because that's why they're all in this sector doing new things every day, pushing the boundaries. But a little bit about the future. So obviously media is interesting concept for the future and what it's going to look like. You're heading up a large company. What do you see the future of media looking like, especially here in Australia?
I think that the scaremongering has sort of died away now. I think people have realised that TV isn't going to die. It's just how we utilise it. And when I say that, I'm talking about content. Right? The world's about content. Everything we do is about content. How we watch content. So the biggest growth platform at the moment is people at home at night streaming onto the TV. So for us, I can tell you that, you know, our numbers, if I wanted to know what the biggest area of growth has been, we have an on-demand platform called 7+, and people go home at night and after dinner they use their phone to stream it to their TV. And that's how they watch TV. The TV's not even plugged into an antenna, right? So it's all digital. And what that says to me is, if that's the case now, and my kids are 7 and they watch My Kitchen Rules on iPads, reruns, or Netflix,
to get the ratings up for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So they watch whatever they want to watch on Netflix or Amazon. Then our future is in the promulgation of local and hyper-local content. Mm-hmm. Can we be elsewhere? Yeah, I think we need to be in the comms space. And when I say that, we have already done a deal with, as a bit of insight, a deal with Google, so with the Google Home, because we're trying to be in that position where we are the platform that people use to communicate. So it's not like telcos. I'm not talking people person to person. I'm talking about businesses communicating. Yeah. So when you start talking retail, beacon technology. So when you go home and your Google Home turns the lights on, and then it flashes up on the fridge that you're out of milk, and then that's sent to your phone. And then when you're walking down the street, you walk past, let's say Coles, and because Coles is now using beacons, your phone pings. It says, "Hey, you're out of milk. I hear it's only 79 cents. Why don't you go in here?" And you go, "Oh, I needed milk at home." And that's how it happens, right? That's the future. That's where it's all headed. It's actually happening now. It's happening there in a few countries and starting to happen here. We want to be in that space where we're the application that controls the information that's being communicated around. So Seven has done a deal with them in terms of utilising our tech and our brand to enable that. And that's a really interesting space to play, because it's still essentially distributing content. It's just a different type of content, and understanding that it's not all about the big marquee shows. Yeah, that's great, we can do that. But one thing that Amazon and Netflix and the like don't have is something as simple as Queensland Weekender, for example.
Yep.
All right. So Queensland Weekender typically pulls a 200,000 person audience in Queensland across this state, which is massive numbers for a Saturday afternoon. That is really interesting because no international company has any type of local production like that, but they want it. So why would I spend or put my cost base in the red because I'm trying to make a big marquee show like MKR or House Rules when these guys do that anyway? They're making all that stuff. But I could make the low cost stuff and sell it at a premium to the people that want it the most to distribute it in our country anyway, which still promulgates our brand. Right, so that's the critical piece is what I'm getting at is if you take the distribution of the content or reduce the distribution cost of the content and focus on creating the content, then you start to get a better margin. And so that's where I see us sort of heading. But we are a diversified media company. So we have radio, we have Pacific magazines, the Men's Health, all those brands. And they're all, yes, they're going online, but then you integrate content across all of those different assets, and you have a pretty powerful proposition to put to advertisers. So we make content, but that's not our business, right? We sell advertising, that's our business, that's how we make money. But is it going to be the way we make money in the future? Digital, yeah, we do pre-rolls, we do mid-rolls. We're all looking at all the new ways to make money out of the online assets that we've developed. But I think still, at the end of the day, the distribution of the content comes with too high a price tag. So JVs are our future. Okay. Multiple JVs across multiple multinational businesses. And that's where I think we will find a nice little niche. But in saying that, my view is the media business, due to technology, changes every 6 months.
Yep.
So this is not a place where we have a strategy that isn't rolling. It has to be a rolling strategy with a fixed vision. You need a 30-year vision and a strategy that enables you to continually change and evolve with technology regularly. Right, so that's the living document stuff. And learn from your mistakes. Invest in short run, take the profits, reinvest, keep going. Any long run activities for us at the moment are really dangerous. Big investment, potentially no return, just because of the changes in tech.
Yep. I've just got one more question, and then I'm going to hand over to everybody if they want to ask some questions. But just in terms of a room full of entrepreneurs, all working on their own businesses. I mean, you would obviously, as you've just explained, you're looking globally for different technology. You're looking at what other countries are doing. Australians traditionally, hopefully not the people in this room, because we keep saying it over and over, to think bigger and think globally and look at what other countries are doing. But in terms of, from what you see as sitting at the head of a large media organisation and understanding what's happening in the world, what sort of advice would you have to anyone kicking off any new ideas now at this stage, in terms of how they should be, what markets they should be looking in, or just generally how they should be tackling the issue that they want to solve for?
Okay, so sort of two parts to that. Yep. For me, two parts to that. I think at the moment there's a really good opportunity from a US perspective, and I say that because everyone's terrified of Donald, but there's we're talking about $1.7 trillion investment in infrastructure. So we start talking to you guys about towers and so forth. Well, that then gives me the concept that if I'm doing anything that has anything to do with infrastructure, that's the first market I'll be looking at because they're going to spend that money, because he will. And the Americans are currently at the moment, they're very open to new ideas and tech and so forth, and they always have been. We get their own and particularly Australian, I would suggest, at the moment. That's a view that we've seen anyway. They're very open to us assisting them, and we have just recently opened a production house in the US because of that. Yeah. So we have one international production house in the US and one in Ireland, in Europe. So that, from a market perspective, is what I would think. In terms of where to begin, my personal belief is always going to be you have to, if the idea is so unique that there isn't another competitor, which is what we all want, right? You want to own the market that you're going into. But if that's the case, then what you need to do is, from what I believe, is you've got to find the like-minded person that gets you, but has money. So that sounds, yeah, I mean, I get it.
We're all looking for that person.
Yeah, no, I understand. But I mean, I know that sounds a lot like quite
But they have to be on
simplistic.
board with your why. It all comes back to understanding the market, but also
And
not just
I'm not
the
talking
money.
about the billionaires. What I'm saying is you just need to find the person that gets what you're trying to do. And if that person happens to have some money, yes, it's beneficial. But because we can all get partners, I get that. But what I'm saying is everyone's terrified to give up too much of their businesses, and I don't want to give so much equity away, and that's always going to be the question, right? We always talk about that, and that is a legitimate concern. But if you partner with the right people, it's about understanding that you're just trying to secure the future. It's not about greed. This is where I was going with all this. The greed bit will always destroy what you're trying to achieve. If you want too much out of it, sometimes that becomes the inhibitor.
It's greed versus glory sometimes, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. That can be what it is. Now, you clearly want to make a business that is sustainable, that you create a living out of, and then either you can sell it or grow and scale the business. I understand that. What I'm simply suggesting is the opportunity to do those things can sometimes be best served by accepting the fact that you can't do it alone and you can't always own it all. Sometimes, the best JVs that Seven's had have become some of their biggest successes and some of the deals that we put together. In terms of reducing our cost, I would suggest that the best deal we've done in the last 12 months has been by joining with Channel 9. And not many people know that's happened. Not the business is joining, but I mean that we've come together on 3 particular JVs that take our core functions and bring them together and now operate them as one entity. And yet we still have separate, we're separate businesses, separate P&Ls, we compete. But that just shows you that the 2 biggest competitors in our industry still identify value in that. And so we didn't discount it out of ego. That's the bit I'm getting at, which probably makes a bit more sense.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Anyone got any questions from the audience? Yep. Luge?
Ben, I really like the way you communicated all those issues at the beginning about the war story. But I really like that story, how you said that your team held each other accountable. I understand that. Can you give me sort of ideas of how I could do that with my team? How could I facilitate that?
Like on a daily basis and build it in.
Like, my guys are soldiers, right? So what sort of tactics or something like that?
So the first question I'll ask is each day when you go through your processes, do you debrief?
We have a stand up
Every day?
every morning. Yep.
Every morning? Yep. And that is what you talk about
What we've done
the previous day?
Today and the problems we've done.
Okay, so like a prayers every morning, a meeting that is about the day and what the lessons you learned from the day before. Okay, good. So if that's the basis, if you're doing that, which is excellent, then my advice to that is, I call that a hot wash, right? And the reason I call it a hot wash is because, which is what you've done, which is fine. The military term is termed a hot wash because when fighter jets land on an aircraft carrier and they come into park, the first thing that happens while the engines are still hot is the maintenance operators come out and hose the aircraft down to clean them, because it's much easier when the aircraft's hot to clean it. And so a hot wash is about making processes easier, right? So it does a few things. It allows you to deal with the issues that you find at an operational level and a personal level without having to sort of brief them up the chain as the business grows when you've got a group of teams. And it also allows you to pick up points that will otherwise be forgotten or discarded over time. But when you do that, the point of the hot wash is that it is rankless. So there is no hierarchy involved. Someone has to mediate it and run it. But the point is that anybody can say anything to anyone about their view on their performance, and you have it out then and there. And the reason that you do that is because if you don't do that, it's going to get said anyway, but it's going to get said behind closed doors or behind people's backs. So once you've said it, it's said, it's out there in the open and it's done. Then what happens is if someone does decide to white ant or say something nasty, they're just called out straight away. Why didn't you bring that up in the hot wash? Why was that not brought up in our stand-up or whatever we were doing? And I think the point of having the ability to talk about the mistakes and what we did wrong and accept the fact that you're going to have people that make mistakes, that's human nature, is really critical. So you're sort of doing that bit already. But my view on how you hold people accountable is, if you've already agreed on what you want, how you want to be seen, in terms of what you want, not just what you want your business to be, but how you want to be seen as a business. Right? That's the ultimate. I mean, what is that? How do you want to be seen? What do you want people? Not about what you do, but how do you want to be seen as a company or a business as you are now? So I'm asking you that question.
It's a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, but that's the point, right? And the funny thing is, most people, and you may well have an answer for that, so I won't put you on the spot. But the reality is, that's what I'm getting at when I talk about the standards. So if you want to hold people accountable, then you've got to ask people how they want to be seen in your business. What is it that we actually stand for? Because there's a way I can make lots of money for Channel 7, but it's not the right way. And at the end, it'll break. And the people that I've got with me, lots of the good people will leave. And I'll be seen as a particular type of businessman. And I'm not prepared to do that, because I have my own personal standards and some values that I will stand by. So I want to be seen a particular way. So what I'm suggesting is your decision-making process has to be based on values. But that's what you talk about with your team. And once you've established that, then that's when you can call people's decision-making into question. Yeah, well, hang on. That's not how we are as a business. You know, we strive for excellence. We have discipline. We use integrity. Why did you make that decision? How did you fall back on those values when you made that decision? Explain that to me. Not just for business sense, but for your personal ethos and things like that. So I think you've got to develop that as well. Because one thing that happens is, you're going to grow businesses, you're trying to grow your culture at the same time. So don't forget that. As you're doing that, you've got to ask that, keep asking those questions. Hey, what are we? What do we want to be seen as? I'm going to build my brand. If you're going to build a brand, you've got to know how you want that brand to be perceived. Not just as, yeah, this is the coolest new tech that's hit the market, but the guys that run it are dicks. You know, that's how you can potentially end up if you don't get it right. And that means you don't get investors. And that's what I'm trying to say. And that's why big companies fail. That's why you've got new CEOs at places like Combank, because they weren't doing it the right way. And the leadership will be held accountable. And at the moment, if you're a startup, you are the leadership. So just like food for thought, you know, I'm just throwing that out there. Yeah.
I just love the hot wash. I'm going to use that one. Sorry, just that guy at the back. Sorry. Yep.
Really enjoyed the talk, Ben, and commending Peter on taking us through the journey. It's been fantastic. And I was really pleased to hear about how you handle setbacks, because that was some of the things I was thinking about, and the last session before that was really helpful with that. My question's about how you prioritise what you get involved in. I understand you've got a clear vision of what you might want to do, but then you might obviously have some alternatives. It may not be that path directly there. There might be, flexible to take this and this. But for example, you've got some pretty important responsibilities with your VC and how you've got to respect Australia, and you're working with other companies like PwC, etc., and doing your day job and looking after your family and life. How do you actually prioritise when you're going to say no to things?
Do you ever say no to things?
Yeah, I'm pretty busy. You know, there's some things that there's always a good cause. There's always good causes, and it's never about the cause. It's always just about time and what value I can bring to that organisation or that cause. So the way that I prioritise at the moment is, clearly I do have a day job and I'm accountable for that, so that has to take priority in terms of the workspace. The new way that I prioritise though is my family now takes centre stage, because they've gone a long time playing second fiddle, and that's because of the life that I've lived in the military and trying to transition out. And I'm really comfortable with that though now. You know, like I've really struggled with that for a long time, but at the moment, it's even talking more recently with my seniors in Sydney about other opportunities. That is front of mind, and that becomes the first place I go to in a negotiation. And it's really funny how people are quite receptive to that nowadays, which is good. But in terms of all of the other extracurricular stuff, if I can't impact it at a strategic level, if you asked me this 5 years ago, I would have said I'll just try and do everything and make 50 grand for that charity and 20 grand for that charity by whatever. Now, I'd much rather be on the Prime Minister's advisory councils, working with Bill Shorten on his policy for veterans, before the next election. Not because I'm apolitical, mate. I've been sent to war by the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. I really don't care. But what I'm saying is I will affect a space that is strategic. So if it's not strategically going to impact on the things that I find important in my world, then it's not really worth doing, because I'd rather be changing policy about veterans than trying to help a start-up charity to deal with one of the small issues veterans have. Because if I can stop the problem from happening altogether, that charity won't need to exist. And that to me is more important, being at that level, making that impact. Because now I can, which I may not have been able to do a few years before. So I hope that sort of gives clarity.
Sorry.
My question was going back to the leadership thing. So
Sure.
in the military, there's rank, and so a natural hierarchy, and that rank needs to be respected. That's just the way it's done in the military. And then you come out of the military, and you're obviously a natural leader. But have you had
Thanks.
to experience assholes, in leadership, and how do you deal with that? Can leaders who, sort of feel the need to say, I am the boss, or I'm the leader, can they be?
I think arseholes and leadership go hand in hand, don't they? Someone-
It's a bit like that. No, look, the reality is, no matter where you go, right, you're going to find those people. That's just life. The grass is never greener. It really isn't. It's how you choose to look at it. No one can dictate to me how I'm going to feel about a situation, except me. So if I'm down in the dumps, or I'm upset, or I've got the shits because of the way someone's treated me, that's my fault. Why do I care? I don't care. If you're an arsehole, I don't care. You're an arsehole. I'm not going to be upset about that. You go and have lunch by yourself. It doesn't matter to me. But that's the point, right? It's how we perceive it. So that's mindset, and that's mind over matter stuff. That's about getting to a place. And I'm not suggesting I'm the expert at it, because I'm certainly not. I have my moments like everyone else. But it's more about identifying when people are treating you like that, you have control. You still actually have control of how you feel. Now that obviously becomes different when you're talking about people who are in charge of you, because maybe they can impact your work environment, things like that, and that's a problem. And there's different recourses to take to deal with that kind of stuff in terms of workplace. But my view has always been that a strength, I think, that I have, along with my many weaknesses, is that I can talk at all levels. I was a corporal in the army. And a lot of people always forget that, but I was a corporal in the army. And you will see me at 7 going out the back at lunchtime and doing some circuit with the camera guys. And they'll be talking very differently, like army guys. And I can talk that language, we can have that chat, it's fine. And I can go and put my suit on, and I'll go down to Sydney, I'll go off the plane, I'll go and sit with the CEO, we can have lunch with the board members, and we can talk EBIT margins, and we can talk, all the NPVs we've done over all the initiatives that are coming up. And everyone's happy with that. And then I can go with my peers, and we can just discuss work and be a bit more relaxed. And the point of that is, much like I said earlier, you have to understand people. And to be a good leader, at any point, in my opinion, if you don't understand people, you can't possibly give them the respect that they are due. And the critical piece to being a leader is that you respect everyone, because it's all about equality. There can be no favourites. Consistency is the key to leadership. That's it. You treat everybody exactly the same way. And I truly believe that, because that's one of the things I've seen in my life many times. It doesn't happen as much as it should, but it's really simple. You just have a set of standards and you treat everybody the same way, and everything starts with respect. I will never disrespect anybody until the time that I'm disrespected. Pretty simple.
Yep, awesome. Yep, to the back.
Hi, my name's Marie from Dietitian Protection.
Hey.
I've been listening to you all day. I don't think enough leaders like you. I'd love to ask some leadership questions, but I'm also a Vietnam vet daughter and gone through that experience. And a lot of these vets are not experiencing issues at the time, but often many years later. And I'm keen to know, I know things are getting better, but wondering from your perspective, where you think we need to go in that space.
You can always do more, clearly. I think the governments of the day understand now there is no more leeway in terms of excuses. that's why there's been so much money promised to veterans and so forth. They've seen what's happening internationally, particularly in the US with the GI Bill, and I would say the government's doing what they can. My biggest gripe, in all honesty, would be I don't think Defence is doing enough. They're trying really hard, but it comes back to some of that espoused leadership we were talking before, where in the regular army you're posted somewhere for 2 years, so you're in charge for 2 years. Yep, I want that to happen. I want that to happen. I want that to happen. I'm out of here. Next guy's got that now, and he's doing the same thing. Because as long as it does, it's sort of there, but it's not happening. And every now and again, you get those leaders that do pull it off, and there's been some fantastic military leaders, and one of them is our Governor General now. But we need more of them, because those guys transitioning, it cannot be, you joined us, we didn't join you. That mentality, right? That's that old school stuff that just doesn't fly. We need to look after our people, and it's no different to any corporate entity. You've got to look after your people. That's rule number one. And the reason for that is because you can have the right people, but the right people might not be sitting in the right seats. So once you adjust that and you move those people to where they need to be, or you let go of the people you don't want, then you really have to look after your people, because they're all the people you want in the business. And so what that means is you need to listen, and you need to understand that it's not just about the margin. Because funny enough, the margin will look after itself if you get the people thing right. Right? That's a really funny bit. And I think we've really seen that in Queensland, to be honest. So we've grown our revenue 6.8% in 13 months. And that's based on, remoting people, flexible work hours, just being nice to people. And when they've got problems, you just go, hey man, don't come to work. Don't, if they ring me, just go. Do what you got to do. My kid's sick, go home. What are you doing here? I walk around the office at 5 o'clock on a Friday. I'm like, what are you doing here? Get out. It's Friday. Right, go home. It's crazy. I see that stuff.
It's fascinating that those really simple things still aren't happening. I mean, we take it for granted. We all run our own businesses or work in an environment which is extremely flexible. So I'm always very still surprised when you hear the rules are based around other workplaces and why they haven't changed yet, because the future is definitely not that. It's definitely this. So it's nice to hear, and it's nice to hear it working in your industry as well. But it does have to come from the top. We've got time for one more question. Oh, which one do I choose? Wow. Okay, go for it. Spotty, lovely dress.
Hi, I'm Carly Carmody.
Hi.
2 questions.
That's the last one. No,
You've
go on.
stolen somebody else's question.
Sorry. 7 nightly news. Is there a space in the news where the good stories will outweigh the negative? Second question. There are some students here tonight from school as they move through their senior studies, QCST, all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
What's your advice to them?
Okay, so I'll deal with the difficult question first, which is the news. So I don't have, obviously, control over the news, because they have to be allowed to report what they believe to be fair, honest and unbiased. In terms of the rundown, which you're talking about, the negative stories, it's quite funny, because we talk about it. I mean, I watch the news, obviously, because I have to, and I don't just watch it on, on my phone. I have to watch it on TV too. I'm the only one. But the point of that is the news itself. You can just have a bad news day, and I understand what you're saying. You're saying that this, and I think it's a bigger step than the 7 nightly news, right? What you're talking about, and I agree with you, is the media perpetuates the negativity in our society because it sells. TV is actually not that bad for it. Could it be better? Absolutely. Print media? Wow, that stuff online, they need a story online every couple of minutes, right? So if you have to do that, how do you get eyeballs? There's some stuff online that's just outrageous. The way they treat other, human beings or Australians, from what I've seen, it's pretty disappointing. And we've been in that battle for a long time. That control over the creative part of news is an individual job inside each network. But I would also argue that sometimes, the news it could do with more stories. But to be quite honest with you, people won't watch it. And that then becomes an indictment on society, not on the media. And I can tell you that because I don't consider myself a TV guy. I don't consider myself in the media, as a media person, because I've been there 4 years, and I probably am, but I have 20 years of experience outside the media in an organisation that is all about integrity and values and ethics and putting something bigger than yourself in front of everything else. I struggle with that too. I really understand what you're saying, but it's a much broader issue than the 7 years. And I'd like to think, particularly in Queensland, whilst there's some negative stories, I actually do hold them to account. And there's been a lot of times, and this wouldn't be common knowledge, but there's been a number of times when I have had our journalists re-contact business owners and do make good stories, a positive story, because we haven't done it the right way. And it's been, in terms of what I believe, it's been unfair, whether that's agreed with or not. And we do that because it's important to understand that you can't just run a story and then forget about it and expect that the person whose life you've just spoken about can move on from it. Because I've been through that, because I have a profile, and I've been through that quite horrendously on numerous occasions, and as has my family. So I fully understand it. So it's an interesting position to be in, where I am, but it is up to them to determine that. But they are actually governed by some pretty strict rules. The second part, which is much more interesting to the kids. So to anyone, these guys, who's the kids in the audience tonight? The guys at school, I should say.
Someone here.
Okay. You guys at the last year of school? Yeah? Okay, good. I bet you're happy about that. Yeah. Okay, all that stuff I said about school before, I was joking. That's not So my point will be this. It doesn't matter, right? You've got to always try. And sometimes it takes everyone a bit longer to realise why you want to try. But once you work out what it is that makes you want to try to do your best at anything it is that you want to pursue, go after it. Don't let anybody tell you what you should be doing in terms of what is a better job than another job. Right? Don't let anybody dictate where you need to spend the rest of your life, right? Because of what society's view is on it. You've got to do what makes you happy at the end of the day. I wanted to be a soldier. I didn't like school. I went back to school and I loved it. And now I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's fantastic. But I did the job I wanted to do. To go to the thing I said earlier in the day, I lived my dream because I did what I wanted to do against everybody's, view in my family. You need to, if you're going to go in the army, you've got to be an officer, right? Well, but I don't want to be an officer. No, well, you have to. You've got to do that, because if you don't do that, then it's just some lowly job. Well, that's what I want to do. I want to be a soldier because they're the ones that are going to be able to get in the SAS and do that stuff. Oh, you don't want to do that. I do. My point's really simple. Do what makes you happy, and you'll always succeed. That's the critical bit. Don't let anyone dictate to you, because you know what? At the end of the day, you've only got one life to live. And I think that's probably the best advice I can give.
Well, I feel like I've had a personal 2-hour mentoring session just sitting here listening. I'm sure everyone else has, I'm hoping, got some value out of it as well, because there's so much in there. But some key takeaways for me is the bit that I love the most, and that's people first. Culture, standards, values, discipline and integrity. And you are the ones that can control how you feel. So they were my takeaways, and I hope that you've all got some as well. And I'd love to see everyone doing hot washes. We all talk about stand-ups, but hot washes and rankless meetings. I do love that. I do love the rankless meeting. But what we can do from here, now I've noticed I have not included any of the social media handles of RCL at the back there. So if you are tweeting or posting on Instagram or tagging us on Facebook, please do that and share the love and let people know that if you've got some takeaways from tonight, please do a post. But I also want to put a call out or hold you accountable to actually continuing on this now with your own teams or with your own workplaces or with your own peers or your family. If you did get something out of today and listening to Ben speak, write about it, share it, post something, commit, because that's your own accountability now to yourself, to actually, if you believe this and you're going to commit to doing something within your own teams that's going to change a bit of culture, commit to it, put it out there, write a post about it, do a Medium blog post, do something. Do something after tonight that's going to make change within your own organisation, because I think that's the best way that we can take this sort of knowledge that we have access to and keep the ball rolling, and then you infect all of your own crew members, and then hopefully they do that as well in their own life. So Ben, thank you so much for your time, for everything that you've shared with us, but please join me in thanking our special guest.
Thank you. Yeah.
So he's not even 40 yet. November, right?
That's right.
I'm
Thanks.
tired. So if you want to hang around for a little bit, grab a